whether one is a complicated IOU, or is that a staff responsibility?
Yes, it is. I'm responsible for looking after all official information requests, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds a year. As I said, the vast majority of them do not incur any charge whatsoever, but it is subjective. So we have to look at what's being asked, and we get a sense of how many hours are going to be taken in pulling all of the history. For example, if somebody is asking for information that dates back to the 1950s, and we do get that from time to time, there's a significant amount of effort in canvassing council's files to do that.
Mr. Chairman, are you saying that before any work is done, even the first hour could be free rather than the first half hour? What would be wrong with that?
Well, I think you've heard from Rachel that it depends on the complications that are assessed when that request is made. And I wouldn't want to put words in her mouth, but she did say that only a very small number. So in percentage terms, I'm guessing it's pretty minor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say of the hundreds of information requests we receive every year, possibly 2 incur a charge.
So does that mean that all the work can be done within a first half hour?
Not at all. Some of them take many hours. We just choose not to apply a charge because of the obligation to provide information freely and ensure that our information is transparent.
I think so. If that could be clarified, would be helpful to the wider community. Don't know how you do it, Rachel, but
well, I think Rachel has just clarified it. I think perhaps you're asking that we explain it to the wider community so they're aware of that. So thank you. Were you wanting to ask about the same issue? Because Rod, okay, well, I'll let you come in ahead of Rodney.
Thank you, sir. Just to point out, actually, the first hour is free, according to here.
Okay.
No charge, staff time, first hour.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's been indicated already that often was a considerable number consume that into that time, intrude into that time to provide that information. So thank you for that clarification. Councillor Joyce.
I just have a question, if we're still on questions, about why we're hiring outside facilities to do the face-to-face meetings. We have facilities in Waihi Beach. We have a facility in Te Puke, and I think there's a pretty good community hall in Te Puna as well. So why do we feel the need to go out to restaurants or cafes to do the face-to-face korero? Because it just seems at a time when we're supposed to be saving money, we're choosing to spend it.
Yeah, I think the real issue is about going to places where we believe we'll get the best interactions with the greatest number of people. But Matt, do you want to answer that?
I think that's essentially it. You're going to where the people are rather than asking them to come to us. So we usually get a better hit rate if there's people already there and you can engage them in that conversation. Otherwise, people voluntarily choosing to come talk about an annual plan are usually a minimal number or have very specific questions that they would ask regardless.
So are these facilities going to be open to the public at the time, or are we booking them out? Because if we're booking them out, the public won't be there unless they come to see us.
We're booking part of the venue, but not the whole venue. So yes, they will still be open to the public.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coxey.
Mine's about the rating, just pages 49 and 50, just in the general rate and also the targeted rates. So the general rate and the dollar of capital value, the rate reflected there, we don't see what the one was the previous year, but is that reflective of the increase of 7.1%? It is, okay.
Yes, it is.
Well, yes, okay. Just one other quick question. So the values that will be the rateable values that will be used for the new rates, will they be the 2022 ones?
So currently we've got just the ones currently before the 22 evaluation. So once we've got the Auditor General sign off, and the dates at the moment are looking like 12th of April, we will be in a position to release some of those new examples. Presently, because of that reason, it's just where it is currently.
Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
This is not my question, but that information, we're currently going out with 2019 valuations, and when we finalise, it'll be on the current ones. What likelihood is that going to change what we're currently going out with of 7.41 in terms of a overall general rate?
So
That's
it
not my
will,
question.
yeah, so it will still be the 7.41%. It's just the mix of properties and how
Okay,
it's
that's
allocated
fine.
across the board.
Okay, so I'll pass my place here. So we made a commitment to keep the rates below 4.4%, and that in doing that would encompass any inflation and things like that. Now we know inflation's gone up, and that's what we're looking at with this part of our rate increase. Am I correct? Yeah. So if we're looking at that inflation being an impact on that, we're already accounting for that in our rate increase. So why are we having, and I'm assuming that that's right across all our services, fees and charges, why are we having an increase in all those when we're actually accounting for the inflation within our rate increase?
So
I see, just for example, the library one's gone up $14.
So it comes down to how we fund our activities. For example, libraries isn't funded solely by rates, but also by fees and charges as well. So if you put up the rates, you have to also put up your fees and charges to account for that increase in cost. Otherwise, your balance would fall out of whack and you'd end up rates subsidizing more of the charge, more of the running and operations of that activity than would be normal. So for example, if your resource consents, if you didn't put those up by inflation and the cost of actually delivering the service, it would mean that your rates would be subsidizing it.
Okay. So the rates increase for inflation is covering what, our projects, or what's that covering?
The rates increase is covering that, the rates, the part of that activity that is funded by rates. So the increase to your fees and charges covers the part of the activity that's funded by fees and charges.
Okay. So they're two separate things.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray-Benge.
So as I went through the fees and charges, I thought to myself, God, we're charging like wounded bulls. And here we've got an inflation rate, and we did take into account 4% for our inflation rate as you prepared for the budget. So now we've got a 7-point-something inflation rate, which means an extra 3-point-something%. So I wondered why, in fact, designation notice of requirement for miscellaneous charges goes from 3,000 to 3,500. And it just sort of goes on. And return of property seized under excessive noise, 256 up to 300. And it just seems as though we're going the extra mile to take the extra dollar from people when in actual fact they're being squeezed. But I think we're just adding to the inflation problem that this country has. And so I just am so disappointed that when you change a cancellation of consent, it goes from 3,000 to 4,000. That's not a 4% or a 7% increase. And the same with building in coastal areas, that goes from 4,000 to 4,500. And so I just feel most uncomfortable, and we're really relying on the community at large to tell us their opinions as to where we're at. And I think we could have trimmed a bit more off this budget if we started to do more work on it.
As you're aware, over the last few years, we've made significant effort to move fees and charges more in line with the actual costs that are incurred. And so why that they are reflected like that. But I'll ask, Rachel, is it appropriate to ask you to comment? Alison, would you like to comment, please?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Our fees and charges for our regulatory services are to deliver around our revenue and financing policy. So if there is additional costs in terms of us delivering service, those are to go back against the consent holders. Our focus has been very much on ensuring that there is not an increase in rates funding allocated against these services.
Thank
I
you.
remain concerned that as we need development, the fees and charges, I've got a friend who every time she does something, it isn't just in the hundreds, it's always in the thousands. And so I just feel for people out there that are actually trying to make this community better than it is. And we really thump them with charges that I think really are tough.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
A couple of questions, if I may. One following on from Margaret's. You've talked about increasing charges to better reflect the costs. Are we now there? Are we now reflective of our costs so that we can expect fees and charges to increase more in line with inflation in future years? Or is there still some ground to be made up? That's my first question.
Is Alison the right person to answer there again?
Through Mr. Chair, I could make a general comment that it is a focus for all of our teams across the organisation to ensure that we are delivering on what is best practice and best financial practice in terms of looking at cost savings. We're looking at opportunities for reducing expenses. We're looking at time cost assessment against each of our activities. So we are always looking at improving the delivery of our fees and charges and the costs for our ratepayers. So I know it's a very general comment, but there is considerable time and effort spent across the organisation looking at our activities, and I believe that this is well represented in terms of what's been put for you for annual plan.
So I'm still not sure, are we yet at the point where cost recovery is 100% on these activities? I mean, we've been told that we've been working towards that. I just don't know if we're there yet. I mean, it doesn't necessarily be a question that needs to be answered today, but yeah, we've got, as Margaret has pointed out, some increases that are well above inflation. So that suggests we're still perhaps catching up.
Thank you. If I go to Adele, please.
Through the chair, and so just in response to some of the other comments that have been made. So try again. There is a requirement to look at our fees and charges in terms of the revenue and financing policy. So ultimately that determines what that split should be, the public good, which is what we pay for by our rates cost, versus our private, which is funded by our fees and charges. So there has been a lot of work done this year to bring that back up to where it needs to be. There's still a couple of areas that we're still looking at that we haven't quite achieved that because the size of the increase was probably, in terms of what Margaret was saying, too large, and we have to step that through. But ultimately, you know, we've got a policy setting of council about that split, and we need to work towards that. In terms of, are we going to be back in line with inflation? It also depends on the drivers of the activity and the cost of the activity. So when you've got some compliance costs or some other costs coming through, or some things that are outside our control that might be above the inflation, because some of our inflation costs are, you know, based on different indices, and so we are exposed to some of those. So we may be at risk of not always being in line with inflation, depending on what the drivers are for the activity. Thank you.
Councillor Thwaites.
No, I found the answer on page 31 regarding the close to the 30% cap that was included in the discussion on the uniform annual general charges. So I think it's largely covered. Have you done that figure at all based on the numbers? Do you have the answer?
It was definitely well below. I don't know off the top of my head right now, but we can come back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Granger.
I've got a number of comments and a couple of questions. I did find the text on page 15, to be very repetitive with James's comments on page 14. That's by the by. Then throughout the document, we've got titles in Maori and in English. But on the one on page 15, it's got Maori and English one. Then on page 48, I think that the last paragraph there may have snuck through from a previous version of the document. It says that please note these examples do not include GST or regional council rates. We collect these on behalf of the government. Well, we don't, regional rates don't even come into it these days, so I think that paragraph needs a tidy up. My question was page 52 on the solid waste target rates. And I just wondered why they are not uniform across the district.
Sorry, are you talking about the curbside?
Well, it's just the solid waste targeted rate.
The solid waste targeted rate funds the recycling centres.
Ah, right.
So you've in the Western, you've got you've got Katikati and you've got Athenry recycle centres, and in the Eastern, you've only got the Te Puke one. So that's why there's the differences there.
So it's nothing to do with curbside, right?
No, it's not. Curbside collection targeted rates is the one below that.
Thank you. And the last one was the Te Puna Community Centre rate. Why are we still collecting that?
So, yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chair. So the discussion that we had in terms of the issues and option papers was to look at the Puna Community Centre and for that rate to continue for this year to fund, to make sure we have enough for the demolition and also for the potential temporary building. It may change between now and the final adoption, depending on the approach from the different users of that site.
Thank you, sir. Those are all my questions.
Okay, Councillor Wickers.
Just editorial. So on page 45, there's a table there under the wastewater. There's 8 lines that are duplicated. The first, it's basically the table was twice. Just saves you 250K.
Well done. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of them actually, although they say here, I'm looking at building services and solid fuel heater, domestic fireplaces and so on. They've gone up a horrendous amount. It does say here costs due to the actual costs involved together with inflation, but to have increases for these permits by $307 and by cost to about, it's so around $307 is quite a significant cost increase.
I'm looking back at Adele. I'm guessing it's in relates to the comments you made earlier.
Then the other one, sir, is actually on page 126, and I guess following on from Councillor Thwaites next door to me asking the other day, and former councillors from Waihi Beach, Katikati Ward. It's to do with the Fincos and Waihi Beach with the wastewater Finco charges, which is so much more now than any of the others. It swings and roundabouts, but it still makes Fincos from the beach over $3,000 more than anywhere else, even with the swings and roundabouts. But why is this still so high after thick end of 20 years?
Who am I going to get to help here? Is this a Mr. Ellis one?
So the question is, why is it more than the other communities, as opposed to the how much has changed? Sorry, is that the?
Well,
Assembly?
it's just basically that we're talking at 17,000, the next nearest to it is 10,000.
Yep, so.
And the Waihi Beach system has been in quite some time now, and I would have thought somewhere along the line it would have started to level out a bit.
Yeah, so it hasn't, the repayment of the debt hasn't been completed yet in terms of the original construction of the system. And so the financial modelling provides a payment over time. And so even the new lots that are joining now are still paying for the original system plus the net holding costs for that. And so a financial contribution will continue till the planned growth at Waihi Beach finishes. And an extra 100 lots, whatever the figure is, will still need to contribute towards the system.
Okay, Councillor Murray Benge.
Again, sir, I accepted the arguments that were, the replies that were given before, but I'd just like to know on 111, notified resource consent applications, designations, heritage orders and plan changes, it goes from 7,000 to 10,000. And for limited notification, it goes from 5,000 to 7,500. How much more time are we putting into this now that we have in the past?
Alison, you thinking hard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The public notification and limited notification processes are very complex. They do take a significant amount of time. Please note these are minimum fees. So as soon as we bring commissioners and specialist advisors in, and we have, generally speaking, only 2 to 3 notified hearings per year, there is significant amount of time and cost associated with these. So as I said, these are just a minimum fee. It is truly reflective of the cost of these processes.
Question was, how far behind have we been and for how long?
I don't have that information in front of me, but these fee comparisons have been certainly looked at in terms of our other neighbouring councils, and our costs are, generally speaking, less than our neighbours.
Would it be fair to say that over time, some of these applications are becoming increasingly complex because of increased requirements?
The last notified hearing that we had here was for the Jace Town Centre. So for those councillors that were involved in terms of at that time, they would know that that was a significant consent hearing process that went over a number of days with legal representation from all parties involved. So the costs and the processes are getting significantly more complex.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Coxie.
Page 128, and the answer might be self-evident in the per household, I think, but so I noticed that wastewater Aomokoroa and stormwater Aomokoroa, those figures have gone down. Is that because there's an increased number of households or averaged out or whatever? Is that how it works?
It's based on the updated structure plan model. So when we change the timing of projects or when the actual costs are entered compared to the original estimate from a year ago, then that alters the calculation. So there's a range of factors that come into it, and you'll find every year that the financial contributions will change. Sometimes they'll go up, sometimes they'll go down.
Councillor Joyce.
I'm still having trouble with the, and I know the timing's not totally under our control, with going out for consultation on rates numbers that aren't actually what's going to be imposed. And I think previously we were told, you know, and again, I know this is not under our control, by QB that they expected to finalise things around the 8th. Now we're out to the 12th. The 12th is only 2 weeks ago. Are we reasonably sure they've got the dates sorted now? And what would be the impact if we waited 2 weeks so that we could put out to people correct information about the impact for them, you know, even with a calculator online and things? Because I realise we can't do it at the moment because the numbers, there's no way you can put up a calculator with numbers that aren't real. So what would be the impact of waiting 2 weeks to start the consultation with the actual correct property values?
Well, I imagine we'd have to have a very short consultation period then, because we still got to complete the other steps through of the process. But I don't know, Matt, Rebecca, who wants to?
I'll kick it off and pass it on to my colleagues. In terms of just the dates, obviously you've noted that it's shifted and that is out of our control. So at the present time, we know that's the date. However, obviously, if there's anything that comes up, it might get shifted again, and that's where the other part of the process will be having a flow-on effect.
And in terms of pushing it out a further 2 weeks to wait, one, that date may then need to be pushed further because those dates are out of control, but also it does mean that from an adoption deliberation to provide you all with opportunities to be able to consider the information without feeling crunched for time at the May-June period. If we push it out by 2 weeks, we still need to go out and consult for 1 month, which would then push us towards the middle of May, which then means that you're asking to have basically any formal hearing. If we have a series of people who want to come in, we have to provide time for them to be able to come in as well. Then you're asking people to consider information in probably about 2 weeks, which doesn't provide us as staff sufficient enough time to be able to run any kind of numbers to reach that end of June deadline to be able to adopt for rates.
Thank you. I'll just go to Rachel now again, please.
So the short answer to that question is that you won't be able to adopt your annual plan by the statutory timeframe of 30 June.
Yeah. And we do need to keep in mind that it's not the amount of rate we're collecting as a council that matters. The effect is how it impacts on individual ratepayers. It's not proposed, not expected to change what we collect as a council. So, did I go to you? I did. All right, I think I've run out of questions. So, is there someone prepared to move? And I'm happy to take this in parts. So certainly deal with the first and second recommendations to begin with, if we can. Councillor Murray Benj. Okay, that was simply that the annual plan consultation document and draft schedule of fees and charges be received, and that it's of medium significance. So it's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Crawford.
Could I speak to it as well?
You may.
One of the things I think about the annual plan this year. One of the things I think about the annual plan this year is that we're calling for public submissions to be able to come in and present to the council. Sometimes councillors say, oh, it's too tough on people. But if people feel strongly enough, they know how to come in and how to present to us. And I think it's a good step forward, sir, that we're doing. And I'm very grateful that we're doing that. Because if we've got anything wrong, people will soon tell us. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Right. No other speakers? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carry. Right.
Close it down.
Slightly delayed. Please. He's obviously not against it. You just want to confirm it.
James, can we just confirm we're having trouble getting the sound all the way around the world? You were voting in favour of that motion?
Yes, I was, yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the third recommendation. We have a mover and seconder. Councillor Granger, Councillor Thwaites. Any speakers? In that case, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carry. All right. Number 4. that the draft consultation document and supporting information be adopted for the purpose of consultation from 30th of March to 30th of April. Were you moving, Councillor Henry? Seconded, Councillor Daly. Do we have any speakers? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Number 5, that the draft schedule of fees and charges in the statement of proposal be adopted for the purpose of consultation. Do we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Sol, Councillor Granger. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Murray-Benge.
Sir, I've spoken before. One of the things that worries me is that people, if they feel that our charges are too high, are going to go off and do it anyway. And they'll rely on their neighbours to pop them in for doing the wrong thing. And we know that that can happen. And so I just think keeping control of our fees and charges is fundamental to us being an honest and community in large. So, but I have to vote for it. I just hope people make some comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Oh, it's just a bit hurried again, wasn't I? And so the final one, number 6, that the Chief Executive Officer be delegated authority to make minor editorial changes to the documents if required. Councillor Green.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Was that the mayor moving, was it?
I was happy. I said I was happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Seconded, Councillor Granger. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carry. I believe that was to the earlier one. Okay, so we don't have any information to receipt, so that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. So thank you all very much for your attendance. And I won't say your spirited bidding, but your good